Hello, everyone. I am here with Tammy, who is the scriptpreneur. How cool is that? So, Tammy comes from the world of Hollywood and is now sort of translating those mystical things to the rest of us. So, welcome. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you. You know what? That's very well put because it was very mystical to me as well. And there are still parts of it that still are, which is kind of a good thing, but I'm getting ahead of myself by saying that. Um, I was just like anybody else who maybe has a story to tell, is that I had a story to tell. I had a big story that I wanted to tell. I found out about these female pirates that lived 300 years ago, and they were real people. And I'm thinking, this needs to be a movie. I mean, I'm picturing the whole thing right there in front of me. And I was kind of on a break. I was a singer at the time. I was a musician. I was arranging music and stuff like that. And I was just on a break, and I was actually on vacation when I found out about these pirates. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell their story. Nobody else has. I should have seen a movie about them at the very least, right? So
Definitely.
I went on a big long journey, and it took quite a while, and it literally took me around the world because I actually did research because this was 300 years ago, but it's Caribbean. These are the actual Caribbean pirates, and it's very hard to find archives and stuff. I mean, I ended up in London and in Holland and all along the entire eastern coast of the United States, all the way down from Key West up to, which is where I found out about them, all the way up to Harvard and all the Ivy League schools and everything. So did a lot of work, but then I still had that mysticalness of like, okay, so how do you write a screenplay? Okay, now I know about these
Yeah.
pirates, or at least as much as I can know. And so that took me on yet another journey. I started a writing group so that I could learn, but also so that we could learn from each other and help each other. And that worked out really well for me because I learned how to write a screenplay, and suddenly people were asking me for help with what they were learning, because it just like things were snapping for me and it was working, on like all the nuts and bolts of it and everything and the mechanics and everything. It just worked for me, and I ended up having to kind of hang a shingle of like, okay, I'm an editor now.
I love when
Because
people
too many
come
people.
to you and tell you what they want from you. That's the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, as a musician, I had the same thing. I was kind of repeating history a little bit because 20, or at that time it was about 10 years earlier, or more than that. I had a lot of people coming to me saying, okay, we need you to arrange this music. We need this. And it's like, okay, well, then I guess I need to just like do this, you know, same thing. But I still didn't know the ins and outs. And so as I learned the ins and outs, I was meeting people. I was going to these events that they had in Burbank, California, and getting the proximity as well as meeting the right people and everything. But for a long time, I really couldn't finish that script or any other script that was long. I could do shorts and things like that. And it wasn't until I went on a quick retreat. It was a 48-hour retreat, but it's only because I had been meeting people that I even knew about this retreat. I was invited to it, and it was to
Networking.
write. Yeah, exactly. And it was to write a script in 48 hours. I wrote a script in 48 hours. I couldn't believe it. But through that guidance, I couldn't have done it on my own at that time. And just by having people there and in the room, and kind of giving us little pep talks here and there and guiding us through, and that script went on to do really great things. I turned it into a book, and on my own, not knowing exactly what I was doing last year at Halloween, I turned it into a book, Evangelina. And it's about a ghost girl. It has nothing to do with pirates, but it was my 48-hour experiment, but it won contests. It did really well. And so I learned the ins and outs through doing all that stuff and everything. And now it's actually in pre-production and it's being made into a movie right now. So
Oh my
yeah,
goodness. What happened to the pirates? Do I get to see that movie?
that's the interesting thing, is that I ended up writing all that, what do you call it? All that research that I had done actually led me to, I'm in Orlando, Florida. It led me to what I call the prequel to the Pirates. And that is what brought us the Treasure Coast here in Florida. And I wrote The Treasure Galleons. And this has been a #1 bestseller for over a year, but I wrote it for the 300-year anniversary of when the events happened, which is 12 ships that went down on the East Coast and they were carrying about $400 million in treasure. And there's still about $200 or $300 million of treasure out there on the East Coast that are waiting to be found. So
No wonder people are still treasure hunting. I had no idea.
Yeah. Actually, I met all those treasure hunters through my research. And so it's like I have this new set of friends besides, the Hollywood kind of thing and everything. But yeah, so that's the longish, shortish version of how I got to where I'm at.
And I saw in your bio that you've worked with Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, people came to me at in the first few years and stuff. Now I kind of sort of handpick people, but I also people still come to me and everything for sure. But at that time, he actually came to me. I'm not sure how he found me. He was using a pseudonym, and that was great. I think he came to me through another person he had worked with on the Transformers movies. He's also the guy who does his name is Spiro Rosadas, and he also does he's like the action unit guy. So he's the guy who makes all that cool stuff happen in those big franchises. He's the Fast and Furious guy. So I mean, he knows about car chases and stuff. And he had sent me his, and I had been working with him. Actually, I worked with him for a couple of years with his screenplay, which is amazing, about his own personal story, which is such a standout. And this kind of brings me to who I am and brings me around to what your audience is probably interested in. And that is that he gave his personal story of how he became a stuntman in Hollywood, or how he strove to become. His story kind of ends when he kind of meets the right person and has this big action scene to get to the plane in time and all this stuff. Really fun stuff, but true story. And through him, I think, is how I met Shia LaBeouf. So these two A-listers are suddenly my clients and everything. And I'm like, wow. And they both have really listened to me. And with Shia, sorry if I'm making a little noise, that was just starting to fall out of my ear. Shia LaBeouf is, he's an amazing creative person. And he is kind of an example of how people who are embedded, A-listers, embedded in Hollywood, they get put into boxes, and they're sent down. Hollywood can be very brutal, and it's like, no, you're an actor. This is what you do. This is what you've done since childhood. And he's like, well, he wrote his childhood story of how he became what it was like when he was a child actor living with his dad in a motel, in a strip motel. So, yeah. So it was, so that was what his story was. And then it became Honeyboy, became the movie Honeyboy. And he listened to everything I said. I was so proud. I felt like a proud mother, because he had some rough stuff in the tabloids and all that kind of thing, well-deserved problems and stuff that he figured out how to make something out of them and learn from it. So it was really,
I imagine it's probably very challenging to take a real story of your life and sort of fit it into the framework of a book or a movie with that beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, both of them are a great example of, for one thing, what changed my passion, actually. Because up until then, I had been reading mostly, screenplays by people who, newbies, pros. I had some Canadian professionals that were also coming to me quite a bit. People you wouldn't have heard of, but who are the behind the scenes people behind a lot of things you've seen, and it was interesting. They had great ideas. They had really good screenplays. They didn't need extensive work from me, but they needed me. They definitely needed some help on some things and everything. But when I was sent these personal stories, and they were kind of I guess they would be their origin stories. There's a couple of different kind of stories that we can tell about ourselves, right? There's the origin story, there's the whole life story, or there's that transformation story. And in both of those origin stories, there was a huge transformation. Obviously, most stories do have some kind of a personal arc, most, not all. And that like really just in my head, I didn't notice it, but in my heart, I realized those are the stories I want to read. Those are the stories I want to see. Those are the stories that the world needs. And the Aaron Brockovics, we need those. And that's exactly where I've been for the last year, is just finding those golden nuggets of stories that are from just real people who are doing extraordinary things in the world. Maybe not as extraordinary as they think. It might be that they're struggling themselves, and yet they go to the soup kitchen every week to help other people. That's a story. To me, that's a story. We have somebody in our neighborhood who does that, so I use him as an example. He won't tell a story to me, but there's a story there, and it's like, I would love to have his story told. And so that's what I love, is transformation story.
So if somebody is a speaker, maybe they do like productivity talks and they have a book, what would be the next step for them towards what you're doing?
Well, that's what's, that's exactly what I'm looking to see people do, is take that story, take it as far as you can possibly go, because every step that you take to get it to the world brings people to you so that you can help them. And so if you do have a book, if you have a blog where you've been kind of just blogging your life, Diablo Cody, she's a creative type, and Hollywood came knocking on her door because of what she was doing with the blogging and everything. But all these different stories that I keep hearing all seem to have kind of a similar structure and a similar theme to them, even though they might be wildly different in what happens in their stories. And if you don't mind, at some point here, I'd love to kind of talk about story structure. But if you have the kind of story where you are helping people now because of what you went through, that is like the perfect transformation story of what, traditional Hollywood, I put it in quotes, Hollywood in quotes, because I also have opinions about Hollywood, and it's like, yeah, I like to go kind of around Hollywood because we're in a different world now. We're not in the 50s where everything has to go through Hollywood. We're in
okay, you're gonna have to tell us more about that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah, so story structure.
Okay. Well, I know that you've seen me talk a little bit about this before, and I did it in a crazy way a few weeks ago, and you saw me do that. But basically, I look at everything. It starts with the W. It starts with W. So there's a book out there that's called "It Starts with Why," and
now I understand the talk title that you sent to me.
Exactly.
Like, this looks like she had a stroke partway through. I'm going to skip that.
Exactly. So my talk title would be "It Starts with Whoop." No, actually, the W doesn't stand for anything. I mean, it could stand for right, I suppose, but no, it doesn't stand for anything. It's a visual. It's like that roller coaster of a story. So picture, a W roller coaster, basically, is what we're talking about. And this is a story structure that works for everyone in every situation, because every Hollywood movie you've seen, Jaws, whatever, Raiders of the Lost Ark, whatever it is, they follow this basic story structure. My job as somebody who helps people tell their stories is to help you get to that simplification, because it is hard to tell your own story. And so what I do is kind of walk you through that. It takes like 30 seconds, so I'll just do it. Yeah. So basically, a story starts out with a problem. So here's your first part of your why, right? I mean, your W, of your W. Okay, so it starts with a problem, and then always there is like this set of attempts to fix it. So we try and we try and we try, and then there's a lot of failing too. So now we're in the middle of the W, and you notice it looks a little bit like a mountain, and then we find that elixir, or that like aha moment, and we go to that solution. So we have the problem. It's very hard to get it right with the camera, right? Okay, so you have the problem, and then you have the trying and the failing and the solution. And so what you want to do as somebody who is helping somebody is that you want to be the person who has that problem and that solution, and you wipe out that mountain to a victory for that person. That is what a lot of us are doing. Maybe you don't even wipe out the mountain. Maybe you're a mountain guide and you take people over that mountain so that they can get to that solution. But you are the unique person who's been through that roller coaster story, and now you can help others. So that is story structure in a nutshell, is that you've got the problem, you've got the mountain, and you've got the solution. And that's exactly the story that I love to help. That's what these transformation stories are, and that's what people are telling from the stage, if they're smart, that's what they're telling, is they're telling a little bit of their own story. I told a little bit of mine. I didn't know anything. I traveled the world trying to find it. I told it kind of in a roundabout way and everything. But that's basically what my story is that, I had to learn. My big secret, my big aha moment was writing fast. That 48-hour retreat just like kind of changed everything for me. And I realized, oh my gosh, just get that stupid first draft out,
Yeah.
don't agonize over it. And that's what also led me to the W, is that simplify, because you can apply that very complicated hero's journey that you normally see in sort of a circle nowadays. It's not always been in a circle. There's lots of different ways. Yeah, so many steps to it, and all these weird words. I already used the word elixir, but there's like crazy words. It's like we don't use that word in real life. I can't remember what that is, but there's one word that always stymies me when I see it. But just simplify it, and it's a 3 or 4 act structure depending on. That's another thing. You have a beginning, middle, and end is the main thing, right? That it's just simplify, and then you can keep moving forward. So if you're having trouble telling your own story, just get to the basics. Just draw some kind of a roller coaster, get your highs and your lows, and start figuring out what parts really, pertain to the actual story, so that you can get rid of other things without feeling like you're killing your darlings after you've written them. Don't write them, get yourself into some structure first, and then everything can go in there that needs to.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I'm a coach, and I do speaking from stage, and I have a book that has my process in it, not really my story. Right. I come to you and I work with you to make a screenplay that tells the story of how I found my secret sauce and how I'm helping people. What comes next? How do we get that made into a movie?
There's lots of ways, but what I do is I tell people to kind of like look at it as a map to Hollywood, right? So in fact, that's something that I want your people to be able to, anybody who's here today, I want them to be able to look at this map that I have that kind of spells out a path that you can take, and it can be a plan more than just like, a dream that you're following, because that's the problem, right? Is what are the next steps? But if you're already out there and you've got some kind of a book, you're already part of the plan. That's a big part of the plan, is get that book out there, because that's that one thing that you have the most control over. You have the control over the content, you have control over how it gets to the world, and you can make money from it, right? I mean, why write a book if you can't make some money off of it? And not everybody gets rich off of it, but also learn how to make it a bestseller. That helps it at least offset your costs and build your audience. The main thing is that you're constantly building audience. That's probably the biggest secret sauce, which is something that you know a lot about, Carolyn, because you are queen of helping people do that funnel and get things going that way. So that it's all part of it. But I definitely want everybody to have this map so that they can see that they're already on the right path if they've got. And I say right path, like WRITE path. I love wordplay, but you're on the right path to Hollywood. If you're writing a book, if you've already written a book, if you're writing a blog, getting the word out about your story. If you're speaking from stage, that's a huge part of it, is telling your story as well. And finding ways to tell it. I wasn't given like a guideline, I have to say in 2 minutes today or that. So I just kind of spoke today. And at different times, I'm given a 30-second. In 30 seconds, I have to sum it up, in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes, 15 minutes. And so there's all that stuff, but at least get the basics down and you're already on your way.
So where can people get a copy of this map to Hollywood?
Okay. It is very simple. It's just wowhollywood.com.
wowhollywood.com/map. Okay.
Hopefully I gave you the right link earlier. I'm not sure. Sometimes when I write it, I use the wrong word, but yes, map. And if you go there, then you can see it yourself. And it's basically 6 major steps that are all very doable, especially when you take them one at a time. But you're probably already doing at least a couple of them. You're probably already doing some speaking, especially if you're here listening to this, right? Probably already doing some speaking. Probably have something already written. Even if it's not about your story, you've probably already given some kind of a blurb of your story within And anytime you
Mhm.
go on a podcast, if you're a speaker, you're probably telling, at least in your bio, just a slice of your story. And where my map makes it a little different and might feel challenging is where, well, that's where I can come in and help you if you need me to. But that just write the screenplay. Screenplays are awesome because they force you to use story structure a lot more, not rigidly, but just more with more, there's a perimeter around
Yeah,
how
boundaries
you
can
can
be
tell
very
that story.
helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
It helps
So
with creativity to give some boundaries, some
yeah.
limitations.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you do that, if you just draw out kind of a roller coaster of your life, because your life probably feels that way sometimes, right? And you just take those highs and lows and then you start getting rid of the ones before you ever even start writing, that it's like, that is such a huge part of my life, but it has nothing to do with the story, you know, then you know that you can get rid of it before you ever start, investing emotional time into writing that part out. And then if it's not going to fit on that W, then it probably doesn't belong. And you can really save yourself a little bit of heartache that way. And you kind of have to do that with a screenplay. People really agonize. That's one of the reasons I couldn't write a full screenplay. It's like I had these pirates' full lives. I had their entire lives, and
And a
then the
full
whole real
screenplay
estate thing.
is what,
120 pages
120 pages? Yeah.
maximum, absolute maximum. And everybody thinks that they can go over, and everybody is disappointed when they try to bring it to Hollywood and they can't get their foot in the door because it's over 120 pages. I mean, even if it's 120 pages,
Yeah,
it's
that's like a full-length movie there. That's
yeah.
probably
These
for a
days, these
biopic, you want something shorter.
exactly. These days, it needs to be a very action-packed, and that doesn't mean that your story has to be filled with action. I mean, it has to keep moving forward. It has to have a lot of drive to it. We don't respond the way that we used to slower things. Emotional things come with the way it's acted out, and so they still want shorter screenplays
It kind
for
of makes
sure.
me think actually about I've been working really hard at improving my YouTube videos because I want to grow my YouTube channel, and a lot of that advice is about, cut all of the down bits, like make sure that you're moving the camera angles around to keep the attention. So yeah, a very very similar idea. It's like making tiny little movies every week.
It really is. It really is. I mean, and kudos to you that you're doing that. I mean, you are such a student of all of this that you're moving at gangbusters. I mean, I love what you're doing and how fast you're moving.
I'm good at moving fast.
Yeah, well, yeah, I get that.
That's kind of my
But
specialty.
yeah, exactly. I mean, but you're like putting things into action, and that's really what it's all about, right? I can say I'm guilty of sometimes not. Well, I get bogged down with other people's stories, and I'm okay with that. In fact, I'm very okay with that, to the point where it's like I don't really do that much writing anymore. Although I have a series I'm working on right now, but I don't do all that much myself, because I think I'm ready to really help the next generation. And also, my passion is with the real stories. I want your stories, that somebody who's out there doing something for the world, and kind of that why that's behind it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Fantastic. Okay, so everybody go to wowhollywood.com/map to download your map to Hollywood. And you can also be found at scriptpreneur.com.
That's me.
Is
I
there
am the
anything else
scriptpreneur.
that you would like people to know before we wrap up today?
Um, you know, for yourself, if you're struggling with knowing whether your story is screen worthy or not, don't compare yourself to the Aaron Brockoviches. I mean, just but do dream and think about this. That I've mentioned her a couple times, and if you don't know who Aaron Brockovich is, you just need to look it up. Is it Brockovich or Brockovic?
Do not
Brockovich.
ask me how to spell that.
It is. It's with a. I get those mixed up sometimes. But anyhow, she is amazing. For one thing, she is lucky that I should know how to pronounce her name, because she is one of the few where the movie is actually named after her. That's why we know her name so well. It's the name of the movie. But most of them, Rudy is another, and Serpico. But when you think of biopics, a lot of biopics, that they have like a flowery name, kind of a book title name,
Mhm.
and it's like, and we don't really necessarily remember the person's name, unless we kind of geek out over them or something. And so for yourself, Make sure it's about the story. But you can call it by your own name. You can do that, especially if you have kind of an interesting name like that. But the thing about Erin Brockovich, to make you dream a little bit, to dream big, is she solved a big problem for a town. I don't remember all the details. All I know is that lately, I should probably look this up so I can be a little bit more educated about this, but lately I've been seeing all the Camp Lejeune commercials. I don't know if in different areas in different parts of the world, and other parts of the world, I'm sure you're not seeing it, but I'm in Orlando and I am seeing Camp Lejeune commercials trying to reach people who were exposed to all the chemicals and all the bad stuff that she exposed 30 years ago, whenever it was, and people are still suffering the consequences from that. And so now there's this, and it took these 25, 30, whatever it is, years to bring about this huge class action. I mean, there were other class actions, but I guess there's another thing that's happening with this Lejeune thing. And that all stems back to Erin Brockovich. So she's like still making the news. Her name is not part of it, but that's from her efforts, or it's at least stemmed to her efforts.
She really did change the world.
You can have a really, really big impact on the world with your story. And of course, if you're all about, wanting to do more speaking, wanting to write more books, or just wanting to coach more people, the more people who know about you before they ever even come to you, they're going to love and like you a lot better if they've already seen your movie and they know about you, or if they've seen your series, or they've seen your 15-minute, sizzle reel about you. It all takes.
Yeah, it's another authority builder, like having a book. Another little tick on that. Like, wow, this person is really important.
Yeah, if you've already written the book, it's a little harder to get that huge book down into a thin screenplay. That's why I always say start with a screenplay, but most people are starting with that thick book. So go ahead.
That's why they need you.
Exactly. I will help you get that. I will kill your darlings for you if I need to. If you've already written them and they just can't make it into the screenplay, then, it helps to have somebody else who's doing kind of some of the slashing and all that, so that it doesn't feel like you're the one bleeding.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us and giving us these amazing insights.
Well, thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. As you can tell, I get kind of excited about it, so I geek out over it.
That's how I am with funnels. I can just talk about it all day long.
Yep. And what you do is so important, because it's not going to get out to the world if we can't get it in their hands.
True. All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye.